listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me will be Sean.
Hello.
And we're discussing the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, which is, initially we had thought about doing like back-to-back Shutter Island in The Village, but then we decided to put RoboCop in between them because both movies that are kind of hinge on a twist or what the story actually is. And I think it'd be interesting to space those out so it's not the same type of movie back-to-back. But that came out in what, 2004?
Yeah.
So that was after The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs, and it was followed by Lady in the Water, The Happening, Avatar, and After Earth. I forget, maybe After Earth or Avatar or Flip, but like he made that string of movies that kind of sent him to director's jail, and then it took until The Visit and Split to kind of get him revitalized and back out into the public. And he also did that TV show Wayward Pines for Fox that he was involved with. But yeah, so The Village was kind of when he was still at the height of his popularity, and Signs and Sixth Sense were both huge successes. And Unbreakable was a hit, a little bit underappreciated at the time, but it's gotten a lot of love over the years. And of course, with like Glass coming out, you know, it's back in the public consciousness a lot. But you know, Village is a movie that I remember being pretty controversial at the time, and it was a movie that I actually did not see in theaters and had spoiled for me. So when I rewatched it,
That would hurt it a
recently,
lot.
It was the first time I've watched it in full, and we can discuss, you know, how that worked for it or not. But before we do that, we can briefly go through some things we've been watching. And so, have you ever watched those ghost tour shows or ghost adventures or whatever it is?
I've seen like the ones that were on cable and stuff.
Yeah. Didn't you shoot something for one of those types of shows?
I think it was called maybe Ghost Adventures. It was a challenge show set at Waverly. One of the episodes set at Waverly. Zach Baggins was the host and producer. And so instead of them going hunting, it was like a competition. So there would be different, you know, of course, there's tons of like independent ghost hunters.
Yeah.
So they had, I think, two or three teams, and basically they would be on different floors, and they had a base set up in this building that's outside of Waverly. It's on the grounds. It's just not the actual hospital.
Yeah.
And so they were watching it through the cameras on there, and basically it was the teams go in and would go ghost hunt.
Yeah.
And they would get graded on their ghost hunting.
Yeah.
And then swap. Yeah. So that was a really fun experience. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I did watch that episode, and I watched a couple other ones.
Yeah, so I've seen some of the Zach Baggins stuff. So he's the one where he's kind of like a bro, and then he's like in good shape, and wears like, I think like Jinkos maybe, or used to, and has like the chains and stuff, and he takes his shirt off, and he's like, if you're gonna hurt people, hurt me. And he's like showing like fully flexing and stuff. So did you hear? So I watched this movie called my IMDb app just reset. No, I don't want to watch a commercial for that.
So I will say that Zach on set was, he would pop in, do his hits, and then leave.
Yeah.
And somebody's like, does he not like to talk to like everybody else? And somebody said, you know, I'm not disparaging. I'm just bringing up, I don't know how he is, and they said, well, no, they were like, I don't think he's full of himself. I think he's actually a really shy person.
Yeah.
And so they said he doesn't really mingle. Like I talked to him just for briefly, you know, and he would be around some and stuff like that. But he, they said he was like kind of a shy person. So he just didn't, you know, I don't know. But one thing that did happen too is him and somebody else was reviewing some footage, and they started freaking out because they thought it was actually, they're like, oh my God, I think we got something. Like I was like actually organizing some equipment, and they were over in the corner in the equipment room on a laptop looking at some footage from the night before or something. And they were like, we're getting really excited. And then they were like, oh wait, no, like I think it's just this. So it's like, it's not like they were like, you know, they could have said whatever, but I was listening to them, and they were like, oh no, we're not going to try to pretend this is something that it's not. But I remember they getting very freaked out for a moment because I thought something was actually real that they had captured, but they didn't. And then they owned up to it. You know, they were just in their private time watching the video, and they were like, oh no, no big deal.
But this movie is called Demon House, and it's on Amazon Prime to watch. And it was something I remember reading about from like different film festivals back at the beginning of the year. And if you remember, there was a story about a house in Indiana where a family lived there, and then the kid was in like seeing a psychiatrist at the doctor's office or something, and then like crawled up the wall backwards. And there was a social worker in the room who verified the story, who was not part of their family. And so there were some people that thought that was all real and that this house was possessed. So then the family like moved out in the middle of the night and like left. So Zach Baggins bought the house and they made a documentary in it. And a lot of the documentary is like the family that was part of all this stuff, they would not work with them. Like somebody, like a relative of theirs, like an uncle or a friend or somebody, I'm forgetting what the relation was, did talk to them a little bit, but the actual family itself was not part of it. They did talk to people who previously lived there. So family that lived there before the family was in the news. And then they did talk to the social worker that supposedly saw the kid like crawl up the wall backwards, like almost exorcist style or something. And they did a documentary about the house and some people who used to live there. And they have like footage where they talk to like local police where their faces are blurred out and stuff about things that happened. And there was like one cop or security guard, I think he was a cop, that was talking to him about stuff. And he was on screen actually talking. His face wasn't blurred and he was in it a bit.
What part of Indiana?
I think Gary is like one of those kind of rundown towns.
I wonder. Yeah, I wouldn't be interested to see what police officer. Because where's Gary at? Is that south of Indianapolis?
I'm trying to remember. If I remember correctly, I think that's the one we went through on our way to Chicago because of like expressway backups.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a rundown town. But so he bought this house from these people and they did like an investigation of it. And it's that type of documentary. I mean, I usually don't watch those ghost shows anymore. Mm-hmm. It was on Amazon Prime one night and I was like, oh, I'll watch this because I remember hearing about it. And the evidence of the paranormal they get is one of the guys on the crew acting aggressive and trying to like push somebody and cussing. And then people that were tangentially involved with the documentary, like one guy got cancer. Somebody that Zach Baggins had worked with before that had helped him on stuff was going to maybe do something on this one. And then she got like murdered or something. I don't think she actually went to the house. And then after they interviewed the family that used to live there, the daughter tried to commit suicide. So there's things that they were saying like, oh, this is all because of the house and the spirits and the things it's causing to happen. But it's also like, was it all circumstantial?
Yeah.
Is this stuff they're just playing up? You know, most stuff is coincidental, and you can attach meaning to whatever you want. But the documentary itself doesn't really show anything scary per se. There's nothing like no footage of ghosts or things weird happening. There's the old like person standing in the room and like they looks like their leg buckles and it's like, oh, a ghost kicked me, but it's like, or is it also just like I've been standing around before and do that just because like involuntary muscle spasms.
I wish the sequel to this was called A Ghost Kicked Me.
Yeah. So
by the way, Gary, Indiana is up by Lake Michigan.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, that was what we went through on the way to Chicago. And I think that's where it's at. It's somewhere in Indiana, small town. The house he bought for not much money. It was like $50,000 or something that he bought the house for. So if that tells you anything, that's not a lot to buy a house anywhere.
Yeah.
Especially one that actually like people lived in, and it wasn't just like the husk of something you're going to tear down and use the property. But so they bought the house, and I think the end of it, like they like board him in, and he's in there. And nothing really happens. I mean, people always say like, "Oh, I can feel this, and it's cold in here, and here's this." And I think there was like something like a cameraman is in the room, and you see like a hand or like a blob, and then they try to prove that like, oh, it wasn't just the cameraman in the room doing it. It was like a unexplained image that lasts for like 3 frames of this video, and there's stuff like that, but nothing overtly like, oh, this made me come away thinking about things. It's mostly just, this is the house where stuff happened, and was it all just behavioral problems and delusion? The only thing that makes you think about it whatsoever is the fact that there was an unbiased third party that, a legitimate professional person that witnessed some element of it. Now, is it just exaggeration?
Reminds me of Veronica.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's just like, is it exaggeration? Is it, what happened? But in terms of the movie itself, it didn't really, to me, dive enough into what happened. But I think it's because the family that used to live there and moved out has been talking to movie studios about movie rights. So that immediately makes me then think, oh, is this another Amityville situation where it's, fabricated? And
Well, I was just thinking, if you have trouble selling a house, just pretend.
I think they were renting it or something. I don't think they owned it.
Well, I'm saying. Well, anyway, I'm saying if you had trouble, try to shoot a fake paranormal incident and then just send it over to Zach Baggins or somebody.
Yeah, it's like, hey man, here you go.
The most famous haunted house.
So they have this house and people are like afraid to go in it and people refuse to go in it and blah blah blah. So it's just one of those types of, if you've seen their show on TV, it's pretty similar to that. It's just like an hour, how long is it? It's under 2 hours. The documentary is 1 hour and 51 minutes. So it's just kind of like that show, just an hour and 51 minutes. And like I said, there's that one scene that
that's like every ghost hunting show I've ever seen, where it's a guy looking at a computer pointing at the screen.
And then this is where you see this thing coming out of a room that people think, oh, was it just a person's hands? Like, no, it's like a spiritual blob. So there's no real I see this thing.
Yeah.
I now think differently of this. It's mostly the same thing that all those shows do. And I'm not particularly invested in that type of stuff. I don't really care for it. Sometimes I watch stuff out of curiosity. I'm always more interested in this stuff like the Jersey Devil or creatures than I am about ghosts, because, most ghost things there's a speck of dust that flies through. It's an orb, or I'm more interested in the cryptozoological things or the cryptids or creatures, because I do think there's more allowance, going in the history of the Jersey Devil, the weird footprints people found in their houses in early 1900s, 1800s, something. So I think there are more allowances for, animals we're not aware of, or deformed
creatures,
animals, things like that. Because there's people that have, physical deformities. If you weren't aware of what it was, an uninformed person might think, oh, this person's a demon or a monster. And it's, not even something severe, just someone is, 7 foot tall. Somebody that's never seen someone that tall might be scared by it. So I have more allowances for creatures being deformed or, genetic defects, things like that create these legends, or the Mothman, stuff like that I'm more interested in than about ghosts. So this documentary, if you're into their show and you're into the ghost adventures and all the ghost hunting shows and all that stuff, you might enjoy this documentary. To me, I just wanted to know more about the kid crawling up the wall. And they do some recreations of some of this stuff with actors, but I don't think to me it was enough that I'd recommend it to people that aren't into that type of stuff. I just watched it was on Amazon Prime, so it was free for me to watch. I think they burned the house down, or they demolished it when they got done.
Wow.
But it's also
because they didn't want the movies to get the rights to use the house. If he was smart, he would. I know they wouldn't shoot it there.
Now, if I was smart, you would make them pay out the ass for it.
That's what I'm saying. At least you shoot the exteriors or something.
Yeah, but then in the basement, it was kind of creepy. But nothing that. A lot of these ghost things are just people looking at the camera after the fact. And or people being oh, it was really cold, or I felt this, or I felt that, or so it's all just
I just love the South Park episode, the ghost episode. I never saw the appeal of it either, and one of my jobs on that thing was to basically just hang out with one of the teams and wrangle them. Hey, I'd be on the radio hey, can you bring the teams here? We got to shoot their intros, and I would just be with them, helping them, and kind of coordinating.
Be a talkie jockey.
Yeah, and so. So I hung out with them a lot, and they were really cool guys. I think most of them were from Ohio, maybe. Yeah. And I got their contact information, and I don't know if I ever added them on Facebook. I don't ever see them, but I meant to. And I was talking to them a lot about them doing it, and it just seems almost like why we do this podcast. It's a fun thing for them to do as friends, and even if they don't believe it, it's just, it's fun, thing to do, and just to go out, and it's a hobby like anything else.
Yeah, there's no harm in somebody doing something they think is fun or enjoyable or whatever.
So I got the appeal. Okay, it's just what you guys, you know what I mean? I got the appeal. Well, it's not like anybody's going there thinking we are going to find proof of ghosts. You know what I mean? It's just hey, we enjoy going to these places and hanging out together, and I totally get that.
Watching those old shows on Discovery Channel, there was one about the Jersey Devil. I just remember as a kid, I was in middle school, and they went out into the woods and looked for stuff. That to me seems more fun because you're out in a physical location. You're actually looking for things that is a. Granted, I'm sure it's all just played up or dramatized.
Yes.
And even if it is all not, even if there's no footage of them overtly acting, it's just cutting the footage together in a way that plays things up to be what it's not. I remember like the Bunny Man Bridge story, all these things that there's no record of police records. So that was where there's like a bridge where some inmates had escaped and killed and ate a bunch of bunnies. They found like the carcasses. And there was like a bridge where people were in it and someone got hung at the end and all this stuff. But then they look up, the actual court records and police records and newspapers, and there's no evidence of anything ever happening. And it's mostly this urban legend that becomes, fact to people because it gets repeated so often. And I think like the podcast Lore has talked about that before. There's all these things like that. So like to those are harmless. Because here locally we have Waverly Hills, which is where that thing was at that you worked on. And I thought before like, well, maybe it'd be fun just take because my camera, the one we're shooting this podcast on, has like a night vision mode and stuff. I was like, maybe it'd be fun to take that, but you can't take video cameras when you do their tours. You do like the 2-hour tours where you can like go through and look at stuff. And it's not cheap. It's like $75 a person or something, or $50, or it's not disposable money.
Yeah.
For 2 people to go, you're talking like at least $100. It's not just, a few bucks. But you can't take video recordings. Like, well, that's kind of pointless to me because I guess the reason why is they would rather TV shows that come in pay them money. They don't want a bunch of amateur YouTube videos out there.
Yeah.
But it's like, so to me, it's like...
We also have Goat Man.
Yeah, the Goat Man of Pope Lick.
Yeah.
Where apparently it's on that one train tracks. But I think before people climbed up there and died, didn't they? Didn't somebody die?
I think so. I don't know.
They climbed up on the trail tracks because it's like a railroad that's like 50 feet above the ground. That's like it's pretty high. And if you get up onto the railroad tracks and there's a train coming, your options are to jump to your death or to be hit by the train. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario there because you can't really quickly climb down. I guess if you were smart, you could have like rappelling gear and just have the rope on it. So you can just like jump off the side and Tom Cruise it down to the bottom.
Just hang under it like the Lost Boys do.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't rattle a lot. Even people that do a lot of it, like when you work out a lot, it's hard to sit there and hang for like 5 minutes. But yeah, so that was something that was on Amazon Prime. If you're into like the ghost shows and things like that, and you're into the other stuff that group has done, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you're kind of on the fence and not really a fan of that type of stuff, I'm not sure there's enough there to check it out. But it was on Amazon Prime, so I just watched it one night when I had anything else going on.
So the one other story from doing, because I probably won't talk about this again, the Waverly thing that I did was, I don't really believe in ghosts, so that stuff doesn't creep me out.
Yeah.
So the thing of course, the ghost hunting had to take place at night. We'd work during the day, shoot the stand-ups, get the sets ready, shoot different things. They took us on a tour of it, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And so at night, though, overnight's when we shot the competition part. And so my job, basically, they were going with a camera guy, maybe an audio person, and then just the teams. And that was it. So it was there was nobody else in Waverly. The rest of the crew was in that other building.
Yeah.
But I was in the building, too. I was in a stairwell, and basically I had to feed the cable for the camera guy, so they'd have a direct feed. It wasn't wireless.
Yeah.
And then when they would walk, I'd have to wrangle it up. So, and there was another guy on the other end. Well, I was like running the cable, and they were very far out, and I was just standing there in silence, complete darkness. I had a little bit of moonlight coming from the windows, but other than that, it was just total darkness. I couldn't see. And that's how they were running through, of course. Well, I heard this noise, like this thing coming closer. I think I've told you this story before. I heard this thing like coming closer, and it was like shuffling, and I could not. And on the radio, I knew where people were at. One, I knew how long the cable was out.
Yeah.
And you can hear if people are in the room right by you or something.
Yeah.
Like I could hear where the crews were at because they would be talking. They were very far out. I had tons of wire, and I couldn't hear them. And if anybody came in the building, like to bring camera guys batteries or something, they would say on the radio, entering the building, exiting the building. So I knew nobody was in the building. And I hear this thing getting closer and closer. And I was like, okay, I normally don't get freaked out, but I'm like, what is this? I know there's a rational explanation. It's something. I don't know if it's a bag, but I could tell something was moving, and it was getting closer and closer, and eventually I could tell it was like right there in front of me. It came in the doorway, Cause like, but I couldn't see, like I could not see my hand in front of me, literally. And it came in the doorway. So like, I'm like trying to get my phone out of my pocket just to pop it open to get the screen. And I just turned on the screen light and like turn my phone. And when I do, it's like a raccoon standing right there, and it like freaks out and just takes off running. And of course, that creeped me out a little bit, but I was like, okay, it's a raccoon. But that was like freaking me out. But anyway, when we took the break, because the people had to switch floors in between each round, the other like PA that was doing the other cable, nothing even happened to him, but he was just like, I'm out. I can't do this. He was too freaked out to be there. So it was like a fun experience to do. But yeah, that was probably the scariest thing that will ever happen to me in Waverly. Just because, but I'm glad something creepy happened though, just to have that experience, because, I don't get scared of like ghost stuff that much or the darkness, but that was a very fun experience.
Yeah, well, I remember like in high school, I went up there with some people, and this was back when, I think before they opened it as a haunted house. And I didn't realize that it was all like as blocked off and secured as it was, because I thought you just go up there and look at it.
Yeah.
So we had driven up, and I was using my parents' Suburban. So that's like a SUV. It's got 3 rows of seats, and it has like a hatch in the back. So it's a long ass SUV. It's super long. And we had driven up to the top, and we're like, oh, can you just get out and like walk around? Because the gate was open. And then we drove up, and then we're just like sitting there. It's like I was like, this doesn't look like we're supposed to get out, because they had like the doors like taped over or like taped. And it was like, so we're sitting there as we were contemplating if we should just go back down. Then like this Crown Victoria came around and got like right up on our bumper, like within like a foot, like, and they were still moving. And I was like, shit, they're going to hit us. So they, got closer and closer, and they had the headlights on and stuff. So I just the car was still running. So I just put it in reverse, and then I started reversing. And they rode about like less than a foot off the front bumper of this car, and I'm in reverse in this long ass SUV, and I have to go down.
And it's like, it's windy too.
Yeah, and they do this for almost half the way down, because there's like gates at one point that's like closer to like apartments to the street. They went almost all the way down to that second gate or whatever, the first gate, because you come off the road and there's like a gate like a quarter of a mile off the road, and then you go all the way up to the top, and I think there's like a gate at the top where the actual sanitarium is. So they like bumper to bumper, like almost touching or riding. And, I'm having to go backwards down this hill in this big SUV at nighttime. There's no street lamps or anything. And they just stayed super close to the front of the bumper. Then they finally, once I got into that second gate, then they stopped, and I just had to go and turn around in the grass and leave. And it's
I've heard they're pretty intense.
And that was in like 2002, maybe something. Like I was 16, 17, and I was like, we didn't get out and do anything. Like we didn't do anything. I mean, I guess if it was technically trespassing, but I didn't know that it, like, I had assumed they would have it closed off at the point you couldn't go anymore. I thought we were just going to drive
They do
up.
now. They have it closed off right at the road.
So we didn't have the intentions of like doing anything illegal. We were just like, oh, can you just drive by it? I didn't know what the situation was. But I was like, that was scary. Is like somebody being right on your bumpers. Like, what if they had hit us? Like, would they have claimed that we were trespassing?
I had heard that's probably the time they were ramping up to open it. I don't know who bought it when. I can't remember her name, the owner, but I talked to her a lot when I was there. I know she used to go on the Target all the time and use her card because it would say like Waverly or whatever the name of the company. She'd wear like a jacket because my wife worked there at that Target down the hill. And then when I was little, my friends lived at the apartments right at the bottom of the hill. I remember there were bats fly around and like you could see it coming up like West Pages or whatever. Like there was like, that was the big thing when we were younger, like, Waverly, this is a haunted place.
And there was a Taco Bell, and from the Taco Bell, you could see it on the top of the hill when it was in the fall and the winter and stuff, when the trees were thinned out. And, like I said, there was people who went there and did like, there's all the stories in high school about there was like the room 502 that was haunted. And then, like, none of us had actually, like, went up there and broke in or anything.
When I was up there, though, somebody I knew when I was younger, when I was up there for the show, her name was spray painted on the wall. And she lived, like, I know she lives she lives down Dixie, but again, she was related to the people I knew that lived at that apartment right there. Somebody named Dana. But yeah, I saw her and I was like, oh, there's Dana's.
Well, because like I remember all the stories, people saying they went in there. I was like, I don't believe some of these people, but like I said,
that was her last name too. I'm just not saying it, but I was like, oh, I specifically know Dana. And her family lived down the hill.
I'm saying like, because I was under the impression it was like most of those types of things where you can just drive up to it and the part you're not supposed to go to will be blocked locked.
Yeah.
But I guess whatever it was, they had to open for construction or something, and we were able to go all the way to the top. But then I was like, I don't think we're supposed to be here, and then they chased us down. So that was scary, but I never, no ghost.
Yeah, we tried to go one day for Halloween, and the line was like, they're like, it's gonna be like 2 hours from here, and so we just went to Nightmare Forest. And I've never been for like a Halloween thing or anything like that.
I think I went once, and I was like, because Julie worked there for like a very brief amount of time, like 12 years ago or something,
the haunt or whatever.
Because a lot of her friends work there too.
Yeah.
Different local people. That was like a big thing. Because apparently those haunted houses, you get paid more the longer you work there. So if you've been there throughout the entire holiday, you make more at the end than you did at the beginning because they just want people to stay.
That makes sense.
But yeah, so was there anything else to discuss before we get into The Village? So The Village was an M. Night Shyamalan film. Like I said, so it was after Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs, in terms of his major releases. I think he did some other like small stuff before that, but in terms of the major things, that was, a movie that I remember the trailer for it getting a lot of people interested and excited because it looked like it was set in kind of this like colonial era, kind of like what The Witch was recently, or semi-recently, kind of, New England town, supernatural things. And this one is like there's creatures that come in, they're not supposed to cross into the tree line. And
did they show flashes of the creature in the trailer? I feel like they did.
I think they showed flashes of like someone wearing a red robe, like walking through.
And also full spoilers. I think we probably already said.
Yeah, so it was the 2004 M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's a movie, if you haven't seen it and you don't know the twist, it's on Netflix, so you go watch it. Because it's one of those movies where I unfortunately had the twist spoiled for me before I saw it because it came out in 2004, whatever point that was at, I didn't see it in theaters because I had just forgotten about it. And then someone was so mad about what the twist was that they had said it. And I was like, oh man, now you just spoiled the movie. So I knew what the spoiler was for the movie before I ever saw it.
That's part of the reason I need to watch it, but why I haven't watched High Tension. Somebody I know was talking to me about it after they saw it in theaters. Yeah. And I kind of know what happens in that. So I still want to watch it though, because I know it's supposed to be amazing.
So me watching this movie and recently is the first time I've watched it from beginning to end, and I knew the twist going in. So does that, that definitely tempers the what you think of the movie. And something like Shutter Island we talked about, that was another movie where there's, elements to it. And if you know everything going in, does it change your enjoyment of the movie? And there was, in the comments, somebody said that they had guessed what the ending was before it even started. And there's a lot of movies where I think you can do that. You're like, oh, the twist is probably this. Because there's been things before where I sat there and was like, oh, man, I bet this is it. And you see it, it's like, that was it. The Village is one where I don't know going in, you would say, you would anticipate that's what the twist was. But me watching it, knowing what the twist was, I was like, oh, all this makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the things that go in between the characters, because, the cast for the movie.
This is probably the best cast he's had in any of his films, or at least one of my favorite casts he's had in any of his films. So
you have Sigourney Weaver, William Hurt, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard, Adrian Brody, Brendan Gleeson's been in a ton of stuff, Cherry Jones. Then you have Judy Greer, Fran Kranz, who is in Cabin in the Woods, Michael Pitt, who was on Boardwalk Empire and some other stuff, Jesse Eisenberg, who was in, a bunch of stuff, Social Network. There's other people I recognize, like the one guy, Charlie Hoffheimer. I was like, where have I noticed? He was from Mad Men. He was like a recurring character on Mad Men. So they have like this kind of stacked cast with, Jesse Eisenberg and Fran Kranz and Michael Pitt. They're all kind of secondary characters.
Yeah, this Squid and the Whale probably came out, 2003 maybe? Or was it 4? I don't know. But that was like the first thing I saw him in. So I feel like this was right around that era.
And then Judy Greer is kind of a small role. And it's when Bryce Dallas Howard was pretty young. She's like 20 or something. So, or, like 21, somewhere in that range. So a cast that has a lot of like Sigourney Weaver.
And William Hurt. He's like one of my favorite actors, I think.
And two, in this movie, so like I said, full spoilers. Basically the idea, before you say what the spoiler is that you have this kind of New England-ish village. Or you're not, I don't know if they geographically locate where it is until later, but just looks like a pioneer village or something from like the 1800s. And there is, this unseen force that lives in the woods that is kind of like the boogeyman. And as long as the people follow certain rules, they don't bother them. And if they do cross over the line and they come into town, and it's kind of just that is the basic idea. And then Joaquin Phoenix's character, wants to venture out to other villages to get medicine or supplies that could help. And they kind of don't let him. It's kind of the idea of it, because he wants to do that to help people and he can't. And then, events transpire where somebody needs to leave the village to get supplies. And that's the kind of the entire premise of the movie. There's kind of like a little bit of Little Red Riding Hood to it, a little bit of that element, a little bit. And like Bryce Dallas Howard and Joaquin Phoenix characters are an item and things like that. So there's a lot of like, set up this kind of a traditional story.
Part of it feels like the most horror film he's done, like traditionally horror film, but at the same time, it doesn't have a lot of scares. But it's also very much a drama, as many of his films are.
It only has a couple of scare moments. And, compared to something like, I don't know, Sixth Sense had more jump scares.
Yeah.
Or not Sixth Sense had jump scares, and Signs had jump scares, like the leg in the cornfield, and like the most Signs has that scene where they're watching like the video footage and it shows somebody looking down kind of like an alleyway, and then the alien walks in.
Yeah,
and
I
looks
feel
at
like that
the
was the
camera.
most effective scary film he's made.
So I think
probably.
Signs. So a lot of his movies, like when you know the twist, do they fall apart? To me, Signs, having the element of water was their weakness, kind of falls apart because the planet's mostly water, and you would have to imagine during the period, if they were on Earth for more than a week, they would have to have encountered rain somewhere, or water, like sprinkler system, something. So that to me kind of, and then the Sixth Sense does hold together because it's like, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense that everybody who's dead, a lot of times they don't know they're dead, and they're just recycling, repeating their lives and living out. So all that makes a little bit more sense. So spoiler for Sixth Sense, though, it doesn't make sense. A lot of times it shows people how they were when they died, but Bruce Willis doesn't have like his brains blown out, or no, he got shot in the chest. So it doesn't show like, I guess his shirt's not bloody. Because like some people, it looks like they did when they died, and some of them don't. So I guess it's kind of just like his character would get dressed and not notice it or something. But The Village is one where when you think about the twist, like, well, I guess it mostly holds together. And it also has another M. Night Shyamalan cameo. He's exposition machine in this movie, and that because he's one of like the rangers at the end. So he laid out the basic premise. So once again, if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. You can watch it now. But I think now we'll get into full spoilers because you kind of need to discuss that to discuss the movie. So full spoilers now. The story, the idea is that people who in real life had experienced trauma in the current day or present day or whatever, the near contemporary times. So William Hurt's character's father was like a billionaire. So he takes the inheritance and makes this secluded village that they make it as if it's like a nature preserve, and then have like security guards and things, and even paid to have air flight directed around it, and essentially make a village there as if they're living in, the 1800s. And because they think that's a, more pure time where there wasn't people just because his father was killed in his sleep for his money or something. So then other people who live there had trauma happen to them in their youth, like a relative or loved one or something passed away because of violence.
They all met through like basically a support group they were in.
Yeah, so they go and create this village where it's a more simple time, and they will live more, of the earth and not have all the stuff in the current day that makes the world so bad, and they want to live their life that way. Now, the timeline of that is somewhat unclear, and like when did all the kids who were there who are now adults, like how long has this been going on?
The picture seemed like it was almost from the 70s, but maybe it was the 80s. The picture seemed like it was fairly dated.
Yeah.
The security guard stuff, they seemed like they are modern.
Yeah, so it seemed like it was in the present day.
But, you have that trade-off, too, of like, hey, you get rid of maybe some of the other evils of the world, but you also lose, again, medicine. You know what I mean? Like, there's like...
Yeah, so because the idea is when Bryce Dallas Howard's character and Joaquin Phoenix's character, they announce they're going to get married because they love each other. Then Adrian Brody, who's kind of like their friend, but he was like developmentally challenged. He kind of goes off and stabs Joaquin Phoenix out of anger because he doesn't like that happening. And then William Hurt's character sends Bryce Dallas Howard's character. He gives her directions of how to get to get help to go get medicine that can save him because he just has he's getting infected or something from the stab wound, so they can get medicine to save him. So he decides to send his daughter because she's obviously the most fearless out of the group because everyone else kind of, gives up on it quickly. And the fact that she's blind means that she won't realize all the modern technology. So they can continue living their illusion if they want, because even if she gets driven in a car somewhere, she will not know what it means. And it's not that different from saying, oh, it's, a horse-drawn carriage or something. So that makes sense that like she's the one that has to go. She's also the fearless one who can actually do it. And you know,
and she loves Joaquin Phoenix, so there's a personal connection.
And William Hurt doesn't want his daughter, you know, because the Joaquin Phoenix character is a good guy that he liked, and his daughter loves him. So he doesn't want this person to die for no reason, and he doesn't want his daughter to experience this loss when they can prevent it.
Because he has, you know, experienced great loss.
Because at one point when he's discussing with the other like group elders, he asked like, "What can we do with no restrictions?" And it was, you know, just hinting at the fact that they know that there's, you know, modern technology available to help, and then you find out that the creatures are just suits they've made to keep people in line and make it the boogeyman to keep people from venturing out past the woods. So, you know, the idea is, and I think it's like in Pittsburgh, or not Pittsburgh, like Pennsylvania somewhere, like Philly. It's like somewhere out in the woods in that general, like, you know, Pennsylvania region. So how realistic is it you could keep that a secret for that long and not hear sounds of things that are modern? Because are there many places you can go and not hear anything at all, like plane, car, train? Is there any? I mean, I guess there are parts of the country you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're just far enough out, you know.
Yeah, because I know friends that have like property it's not that far out where you don't.
Yeah, I mean, some of his stuff falls apart, but really, I think part of it is, it is kind of, you know, is it just a genre thing, or is it also kind of looking at like, hey, what is the trade-offs, you know, for these people that want to isolate themselves? I think almost part of it feels in some ways appealing to modern days. Like that would be appealing to get away from everything, especially with the technology now, you know, like how oppressive some people feel that is. Like it's almost like this film is interesting on a different level now because of just the way the world is. Many people do talk about leaving the country or escaping. Like you could see this being an attractive thing for many people now. But at the same time, again, you know, maybe it's not super critical of it, but it's like, is this the right solution, you know, for everybody? Like, you know, and there is kind of two ways to look at it for sure.
Well, and is it fair to all the children to deny them all these things that could, you know, so video games, you know, movies, internet, technology, not saying that like depriving them of that is necessarily evil, human rights abuses, but is denying people proper medical.
That's what that's the trade-off.
Adrian Brody's character not being given proper, you know, psychiatric help, could medication have helped him manage a little bit better?
Yeah, that could have stopped the crime he committed.
So there's just things where it's like, so is it abusive to not let people have full access to modern, you know, psychiatric and medical technology and information and, you know, services? So that element I think is more problematic because, you know, giving childbirth, like what if it needs to be a cesarean or the child's breech or whatever? Do they do things that help them not just have the mother and child die, or do they just let them die and say, So it's one of those things where they didn't really go that far.
I mean, they open up with a film with a child dying, young child, you know, not like a newborn or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what that was.
It was a child-sized coffin, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously things happen. And, but, you know, really it's another thing too. It's like not that far from Amish community. Like, I mean, how often do those get robbed? You know, tragedies happen too, but you know, he could have spent a little bit less money and just say, hey, let's go in the middle here.
Well, too, you have the element too, though. There's like the current like court battles over, can parents deny their children basic medical attention because of religious beliefs? Is that, you know, can you deny your child a blood transfusion because of your religious beliefs? There's all these things like that they don't really touch on. They just kind of, and then like the town elders, like Sigourney Weaver's character doesn't do much. She's just kind of there at the meetings and, you know, just like a, you know, great big name actress that they don't give a ton to do. Because a lot of the movie like rides on Joaquin Phoenix and Bryce Dallas Howard. And I thought they were both really good and kind of reserved and not like big showy performances really. Because Joaquin Phoenix is very reserved and, you know, they have kind of understated beats and moments. Like when Judy Greer's character comes and tells them that she's in love and they should be married, and then it cuts to her being upset about it. It's like, that's a very understated way to play that. And I think it works really well. And, you know, does a little bit of character building for him and lays out, you know, how the era might have worked. If, you know, the era they're trying to replicate, like how that might have went. And so I think that all that type of stuff is effective. And, you know, Bryce Dallas Howard's character is blind, but I think she plays it very well. And like her character is very, I guess we'd say like wholesome or like cute. and very like endearing and seems like a very warm character that's just, you know, enjoyable to watch on screen because she's just, you know, a pure nice person that has, you know, like all good intentions. So it's not just like a lot of the main characters feel kind of like wholesome.
Yeah.
And like William Hurt, like you realize the charade they're pulling over on everyone, but then he does go to the elders and say, well, I need to let her go and we can continue living this way if we want. Because, you know, she goes in the woods and she goes with Michael Pitt and Fran Kranz who are going with her, but they both turn back because they're chickens, they're chicken hearts. And then you have, you know, Adrian Brody's character, after he stabs Joaquin Phoenix, he gets locked in the house, but he escapes the floorboards and finds like one of the costumes of the creatures. So then puts it on and goes in pursuit of her just because like, how dare you do this to me? And, you know, attacks her and then ends up dying because she's, you know, uses cleverness and tricks him into falling into the pit. So there's a lot of stuff there that's, you know, well done and interesting. And at that point, it's one of those things where since I knew the twist, at that point in the movie were people still not in on what the twist was in theaters or on video? Like, I don't know. Like, when you saw the movie originally...
I'm trying to think. I feel like when she walked out of the wood, that's when everybody knew for sure. I feel like, you know, you were like, okay, we've seen the picture. Something's going on here.
Yeah.
And the wheels start turning, you know?
Yeah.
But then she walked out of the woods and it was like, oh.
It was like a car.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like when I first saw it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. This time, granted, I had to watch it really late.
Yeah.
It felt a little slow at some points in the beginning, but also, too, yeah, it's when you know there's not actually creatures, it is much less scary. It was way creepier in theaters, but also... When we were watching it, we were probably maybe like 20 minutes in or so.
Yeah.
The lights went out in the theater and it was totally dark and everybody got really freaked out. You know what I mean? Like that was added to the experience and I think the tension of the rest of the viewing experience for us. But
so like the screen went out too, like everything
went completely dark in the theater. And so everybody's like, I think it was storming outside. And everybody got freaked out because it was already like a scary moment in the movie, you know, like because they were showing the borders and all that. Yeah. People got really freaked out in the theaters for a bit. And so I think that helped for sure. But I remember liking it in theaters because it's just a interesting concept of the borders. There's the color that you can't show, the red color. Yeah, there's these interesting rules. The yellow markers, I guess the yellow like wards them, you know. But watching it this time too, the drama elements, some of it in the beginning was a little less interesting and you're kind of waiting for them to just get on with it.
Yeah.
It's not as enthralling as it could have been, I don't think. So I think it definitely hurts it. And this is a film where I think when you know the twists, it definitely lessens the impact of any of the scary moments. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you watch it through a different lens. Like the effect of the film is much different once you know the twist. Sometimes you just know the twist and maybe you know where things are going or the situation better, but it still can be enthralling. This definitely loses some of that impact, but it still has great performances and stuff like that. But also maybe not, you know, the best roles any of these people have ever been in.
Yeah. Well, and too, like to me, the knowing the twist going in. So the moments where you see like the red cloaked creatures, like in the beginning when they're, when everybody hides in the basements of the house or the cellars or whatever, there's almost no tension there because you know it's just people doing that just to keep people in line. Yeah. And you do have the element of like they find all the dead animals and they're like, oh, maybe it's one of the elders just doing it just to keep people in line. And they find out it's Adrian Brody that was doing it. So you find out that there was like things with him that were off. But like throughout the movie, to me, knowing the twist going in and watching it, it's just like, so where's the human tension here? Where's the character development? Where's the element? Because like I said, I had not watched it really until recently. I think I've seen just bits and pieces, like small little chunks. And I didn't realize like I remember the advertisements for it made it look like Joaquin Phoenix was the main character. Because it shows him like walk into the woods and show like creepy stuff. Is what I remember from the trailers. When you take him out of commission, you know, halfway into the movie, or I forget what point in the movie it was necessarily, but you take him out of commission, you're like, oh, it's kind of a switcheroo. Bryce Dallas Howard's the main character now. And because they had built up like he was the only one that would go, he was the most brave person that go.
Yeah, because he was wanting to go and everything.
And there was the game where you turn your back to the woods or whatever, and he's the one who had asked to be able to venture out. And said, you know, I think if they see my intentions are pure, they'll let me go out and not, you know, attack me. So there's all these things like that. and they do the switcheroo where it's actually Bryce Dallas Howard's character is the bravest, and he goes out and does all this stuff. So like the characters between them, I was invested in and what happened to them. And William Hurt's character very much, even though he was pulling this whole charade, he had some elements of like he cared for his daughter and things like that. So there was human elements to connect with. Some of the other characters didn't have as much. Like I said, I think Sigourney Weaver didn't really get enough to do. Like she's a great actress. I always enjoy seeing her stuff. I just don't think they gave her like enough to do, you know. But I think it's probably just at the time, M. Night Shyamalan was hot. Like he was like one of the top directors. Everybody's like, oh, is he the next Spielberg? Is he the next, you know? Because this movie was made on a budget of $60 million and grossed like 256 worldwide. So still a profitable movie, just not as the heights of Sixth Sense and The Signs, but still like a profitable movie. And, you know, still showed that people are interested in his work. It was really with The Lady in the Water where it kind of just started to dip and feel like, maybe he's kind of like a one-note, you know, twist machine. And something else, too, watching a lot of his older movies, it is funny watching it. Like, he does not have as much of a visual directorial style or stamp. A lot of it's more like standard, like shot in reverse, and there's not as much stylistic. Because there's some directors you watch their movie and you're like, oh, this is a Spielberg movie. This is a Hitchcock movie. With Shyamalan, it's more story than style. The way the story unfolds.
But he also, I think this film is pretty clean. Like, even there's not even shot in reverse when there doesn't need to be. Like, because I was actually paying attention to something whenever, like, I think it's Bryce Howard Dallas's kind of against the wall. William Hurt is next to her, and they just keep it a two-shot the whole time, you know? And then the final shot of the film is great because it's this long take of almost from Adrian Brody's perspective, or at least behind the bed, everybody around him. You know, she's here. They come in, say,
or Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, sorry, Joaquin Phoenix. And then they're saying, you know, they say, hey, she killed one of the monsters. Yeah. Adrian Brody's mom, like, breaks down. You see all that. And then later she comes in the doorway with it. Like, they stage, like, that's staged beautifully. One single shot, like, I mean, it's not flashy like Edgar Wright or something, but I do like the way he stages a lot of stuff. And I think that, like, final shot was great.
I think the movie looks good.
Yes, but there's not, you won't look at it and know, like, hey, that's M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, with him, the thing that tips you off to it's his movie is not really the visual stylings or things like that. It's more so the story structure and how there's a twist and how it's typically like, you know, misdirection throughout the movie and, you know, building up tension and characters with remorse and things like that, you know, more so than a visual thing with, like, you know, the Jaws, you have the Hitchcock shot of, you know, Brody, and you have all these things that are kind of like Spielberg trademarks and things he's used again. And, you know, the way he sets up, like, you know, the set pieces as opposed to Shyamalan, it's more of the story beats and the types of subject matter they wrangle are more of the things that tip you off to it being his movie. It's also 2004, so, you know, all that stuff was shot on film versus today where it's digital. It's a lot easier to do some things than it was then. But, yeah, visually, like, I like the look of the movie. But
Roger Deakins shot it.
Yeah. I mean, so I thought it looked good. It's one of those things where, like, I was just thinking about watching it knowing the twist. It's like, well, did they have, like, electrical lights in all these houses, or are they candlelight? Because some of it, I'm sure it was all probably practical lights in there, not candles. But a lot of it was like, oh, like, if you just think about this now, you're like, this looks a bit clean and nice for that type of era, at least compared to what my expectation of what life would have been like in that time period. Because to me, like, The Witch is more of what you think of that would be like. Yeah. Granted, The Witch is like a $2 million budget movie that was probably, you know, it was a more contained scope because there's fewer characters and things like that. But watching the movie, like, all of it, none of it jumped out to me as, like, ringing false for that era. But then when you see the twist and you go back, you're like, well, maybe they did have things a bit nice and clean for that era.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the concept is cool. You know, this community that's closed itself out from the outside world. Again, especially today, like, I think it's something, like, that is interesting.
We have, like, cults and stuff.
Yeah, like, I think it is an interesting concept. But also, I think a lot of people, like, were so into the monsters that was such a cool thing.
When they didn't get
being at the path. Yeah, like, the expectations, that really probably sucked for a lot of people. And, you know, he probably realized, hey, don't pull the rug out from under people in this manner. You know, don't give them don't promise them this awesome like kind of monster movie,
Yeah.
and then not give them a
Well,
monster
I think
movie.
too, like the design of the monsters was kind of cool because they're taller, they're bulky. You don't really see what they look like. And then there, like one moment that was to me kind of confusing is when William Hurt's taking Bryce Dallas Howard out to the shed before he sends her on the trip, and he's like, "Don't scream!" And he opens the door. It's like, well, she's blind. She's not
Yeah.
going to scream. And then eventually, like he lets her touch it, and then she does. Like it seems like he could have just held that until just then. Or just said, "Hey, so just so you know, the creatures aren't actually real."
Maybe.
Like,
I mean, I don't know. Maybe because she sees the colors of people.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought she would, like there maybe be something like she would sense something. I don't
Yeah.
know, but yeah.
yeah. So you have like things like that, but then you get the reveal of it's just suits that they wear to scare people, and Adrian Brody is the only one that actually tries to kill somebody while wearing the suit, and then he dies. So I think to a lot of audiences, when they go in wanting a movie set in kind of colonial time period with creatures in the woods, and they want scary movie, and they want to see creatures and they want to be scared, and then you pull the rug out and you're like, well, it's actually just people doing it to trick people into staying here. Because
Yeah.
then I think people, their expectations, even if the movie was something they would have enjoyed otherwise, the expectations made it so that they did not like what they got.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with a lot of horror comedies, where people want something to be full scary. When it's funny, they don't like it, or when you reveal that it's not really supernatural. Kind of the Scooby-Doo effect. When you reveal like, hey, it's actually this, then that turns people off because they want to be scared. And I think a lot of people feel like their feelings of fear are then invalidated if it's not really what they thought they were afraid of.
That's a good perspective
So
on
then
it.
they feel like they were tricked.
Yeah.
And they don't like it. And then all their prior feelings they felt to them in their mind are, deleted and invalidated. So I think that's like a weird thing if
It's
you
like,
play
you dumbass, you were scared over that for nothing.
yeah, well, it's kind of like one of those things
Yeah.
where somebody feels duped and they're like, well, I was scared earlier and legitimately felt tension and felt fear for
And
these
I shouldn't
characters.
have, yeah.
And I shouldn't have because it wasn't really scary.
Part of me was thinking too, like, is this M. Night Shyamalan going almost like postmodern on his twists? Because this is the one that also pulls the rug out from underneath the audience. The
Yeah.
other ones, yeah, they did on some level, but it wasn't deceitful in the same way.
Yeah.
As far as not giving them what they were promised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
'Cause, like-
Signs, there was aliens in Signs.
Yeah, because Signs was, it was just like slow trickle of information that built up towards the ending.
Yeah.
And then like you get like when Mel Gibson's wife, like her
Spoilers.
last words were to swing away. So
Yeah.
that connects in. And then like the Sixth Sense, you realize Bruce Willis just been living out his life, replicating what he does in his day to day with Haley Joel Osment's character. And then he realizes he is dead.
You were promised a ghost movie, you got a ghost movie.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
so it
Like,
doesn't invalidate because all the ghosts exist and Signs, all the aliens existed. Unbreakable, he actually had powers, as opposed to
So do you want to be? Yeah, was he like, okay, you guys want some more twist? How about you're not going to get this movie? You know what I mean? Like, is
Yeah.
it like now you feel like the younger members of this community where you were duped? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You were taken advantage of
Yeah, 'cause
on
it's-
some level. Like, was he getting bored of the normal twist and like just trying that as an experiment and it did not go well as far as audience reactions? Like, did he know that was maybe going to come? Maybe he was tired of doing the twist all the time.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, people keep wanting twists. I'll give them a twist.
Yeah.
Like maybe he wanted to back out of that corner so studios would say, hey, you can do a film without a twist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
well, like I think I said though, like the idea of like you said with like Sixth Sense and Signs and Unbreakable, like what you promised in the tagline is what you got.
Mm-hmm.
You got ghosts, you got superpower person, you got a villain, you got aliens. And then the village is where you get like creepy creatures, but then it's actually not creepy creatures,
Yeah.
it's just a suit. So I think the difference is even if somebody didn't like the twist in Signs or didn't like the twist in Sixth Sense or whatever, they still were delivered what was promised.
Yeah, they
throughout the
didn't feel
movie.
duped.
The village is the one where they invalidate. It's like, no, it actually wasn't that. So I think that's what causes like these visceral reactions in people.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in all kinds of media and TV shows and movies and things like that, where if somebody thinks they're getting X and you give them Y, and even though what you gave them with Y is as good as it could have been, not saying that with the quality of this movie, just in general, if you promise somebody with Cabin in the Woods, if you promise somebody an Evil Dead style slasher horror movie in the woods, and you then subvert that and deliver a different type
it's
of
all
movie,
set up, like, yeah.
then people just get upset about it. And I think a lot of times too, when there's something scary and you give the reasoning behind it, people get upset. So they want to know more about this killer, this monster, this creature, this ghost, whatever. But when you eventually give that story, it's not going to be satisfying. It takes away the mystery.
Because they've built up in their mind, you know, they want that validation, and then it's either invalidated or not as good as what they've built up.
So when you then go an extra step and not only give the backstory, but say this isn't actually what you thought it was, then that goes another step. So it's just interesting to look at story structure and how that impacts people, and to look at the reaction, because like Shutter Island has a twist and it generally got favorable like user reviews. The Village got a lot of negative feedback when it came out, at least from what I remember. And let's see, what's the IMDb score? I mean, once again, all those are kind of, so the IMDb rating is 6.5 out of 10. So not terrible, but, you know, not like an 8 or 9. So it's not like a super fan favorite. It's just, you know, people, I think the reviews of it now might be a little more positive than they were at the time, because people had time to soak in and reevaluate it for what they deliver. And then the Metacritic was 44, but this is also a movie back when there weren't as many online reviews, so it's only out of 40 reviews.
Yeah, like apparently in the original version of the script too, this is a stolen version of the script, I don't know, that surfaced a year earlier, was when she walks out of the woods, that's when it ends.
Yeah.
And so I think they went back and maybe did reshoots. So I wonder if people felt even more duped and like, we want explanation. You know what I mean? Like, what about airplanes and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, because that end is a lot of exposition and everything.
Yeah, and M. Night Shyamalan, so it has a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes, so not a great score, really. Anything below, you know, 80% for a blockbuster indicates mixed reaction.
And I definitely do think it was, I walked out not liking it as much as Signs or The Sixth Sense. I didn't see Unbreakable at the time when I had seen this, but I still don't like it as much as Unbreakable. Like, I do like it below all those films.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I enjoyed it. I didn't care that it was not what it promised.
Yeah.
I just had a good time in theaters watching it. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to go see a cool M. Night Shyamalan film. I enjoyed it. Like, at the time, I probably would have given it like an 8.5, but now I'd probably give it like a 7. Like, I still like, I think it's still well made. Well, not super exciting, but I like all the actors in it. I like the way it looks. The creature designs are cool. Like, I like this idea. And again, the reevaluation of wanting to get yourself away from society, I understand the appeal of that, you know?
Well, and two, watching it, something it did do is it gave me the feeling of like fall or autumn with like the use of leaves and the environment. So it did evoke a feeling to me, because a lot of times, like when something effectively conveys the feeling of fall, then it kind of reminds like wood burning stoves and just things that you smell in the air at that time of year. And that did kind of evoke that for me. Yeah. But I think when you compare this to like Signs is like world affecting story. You know, alien invasion of Earth. Yeah. So that's like a big story. And this is kind of a step down to like a small little colonial type town. So I think that the change in scope too may have thrown some people, but...
And two, it could change their world. You know what I mean? Like in their world, but it's not our world.
And two, I think also these, like a lot of his movies, if they were all like Twilight Zone episodes, it works great. And I think the expectations are lower. But people are like, oh, The Sixth Sense was like, it blew my mind. I love that movie. And they're like, oh, Signs, you know, the end, like the idea that they were, you know, water was a problem. Like, I didn't, until you think about that in context. Yeah. If you just watch the movie, I remember really enjoying Signs and being genuinely creeped out. Yeah. And like the audience seemed to be into it and really liked it and made a ton of money. And The Village, I think, was just one where it pulled the rug out so much. And it wasn't just, here's a twist on what's came before that recontextualizes it. It was, this actually is all just a charade. I think that was where it went.
I feel like there's a line in the movie where they say something about, well, there were legends of monsters or something. And then so when Adrian Brody comes up in the suit, I feel like the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, wait, is there really something? You know, I feel like people weren't sure, which was a good thing at the time. But even now you're like, okay, this isn't anything, you know, I don't know.
But it feels like more like from him, like from the character in the movie, more hand wavy. Well, we base it off kind of truth and like self-justifying what they've done. But, you know, so like you had said, so like a 7. Like I think to me it is around like a 6.5 or 7. Like it's a movie where I enjoy the actors in it. I enjoy, you know, there's nothing about it that super dates it. There's no really bad effects or anything. Like you can kind of I think watching it without the shackles of expectations of the next Spielberg that just made 2 huge worldwide hits. Yeah. When you take those expectations off and just watch it for what it is, it's a kind of fun little twisty movie that, you know, has good performances, good actors, good ambiance, and all that stuff. It's just, it didn't have the world-breaking twist. So I could see, like, I think like the IMDb user score, like the average of like 6.5, I think that's a more accurate representation in its quality than the 44 Metacritic or the 43% Rotten Tomatoes. Because I think take that out of the expectations of the time and it's a different view of the movie. I just think that the basically movie saying what you thought it was isn't what it is what upset people.
Yeah.
And that's justifiable. I mean, that's believable because people, you know, they go in wanting one thing and they get something completely different. Like I've said before, you could love Italian food, you could love Mexican food, but if you expect one and you get the other, you might be upset. Even though you would still sit there and be like, oh, this is amazing. But, you know, it's just kind of those expectation things. So it's a movie that if you haven't given it a watch in a while, it's on Netflix. You can check it out. You might enjoy it now more than you did initially back in the 2000s if you haven't seen it since it came out. And you know, those IMDb reviews are funny too because the way those work, like sometimes people see something have a good review and they didn't like it. So the fact that it got a good review from someone else means they have to go out and say how much they hate it and give it a 1 out of 10. Because one of our short films, Twin Trees, somebody gave it a 1 out of 10. And I think their confusion was they said like Amazon Prime, you should do better. So I think they were thinking this was something that they paid for or acquired or produced. It's like, no, Amazon Prime, you can upload anything just like YouTube. You just have to not have like full frontal graphic nudity and hate speech or incredibly like sensitive racist things. So like American History X or movies that tackle racism is one thing, but just having like hate speech filled movies or gratuitous nudity and sex, you can't have. Anything else you can upload. And you can get like some amount of ad revenue for it. Because we've made like, I think in total from Amazon Prime, like $20 from our shorts being on there. So not a lot of money.
It's something though.
But I think somebody had seen like it had like on Amazon Prime, like the reviews on there, it had like some 4 out of 5s or 3 out of 5. Generally favorable reviews. And then like on IMDb at the time, it had like an 8 or something. So they, I think, give it a 1 out of 10 just to bring the score down further. Because I've seen a lot where somebody reviews something and they would probably actually on its own merits give it a, you know, 4 out of 10, you know, 6 out of 10. But since other people gave it an 8 or 9 and they hate it, they give it a 1. Because on IMDb, it's usually a really low score, a really high score for any movie.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's a lot of times just people want the review score to come down. They want the average to come down. So they don't say, this is a 5 out of 10. They say it's a 1 out of 10. And then the person just really took us to task because I guess they thought it was like a budgeted production. And so it's just interesting with those reviews. So a lot of user reviews you have to take with a grain of salt. And, you know, go with your caliber, like don't go based on those completely for everything because it's usually just it's the best thing ever. It sucks. There's relatively small amount of in between people giving objective opinion. But like I think The Village being a 6.5 out of 10 is probably more in line with its actual quality. Especially because that's over time. There's probably more like modern reviews that have been filtered in and not just stuff from 2004 and 5. But yeah, that'll wrap up our discussion of The Village. If you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review there. That helps other people find the podcast. If you're listening via YouTube, we enjoy seeing comments there too. So let us know if you have any thoughts on this movie. If you hated it at the time, loved it at the time, reevaluated it, watching it in more modern era. Yeah, I always enjoy seeing that. And you can also send us an email at podcast@housebydvegasstore.com. If you ever sends us an email, we will read it on the podcast. I know sometimes we forget to mention that and don't push as much, but we will read that if somebody has feedback. You can find all the work we're doing at housebydvegasstore.com. You can find links here to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and all that. So make sure to follow us on those and follow us on Instagram at HBTVS_official. Because sometimes we'll post stories and things like that. We always post images about the podcast movies we're doing and other independent projects we're working on, stuff like that. So make sure to do that. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
And I'm at Blevin Sean.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video